Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for our second installment of our new programming, DEY Dialogues, Discussions in Defense of Childhood. My name is Denisha Jones, and I'm the Executive Director of Defending the Early Years. And for our next DEY Dialogue, we're going to be talking about our concerns around book bans and attempts to limit young children learning about diversity in issues around race, racism, and sexual orientation and gender. This will be the focus of our day, one of the focuses for our day 3 of the Summer Institute, where we're looking at threats to quality. And we believe that attempts to censor literature for young children is a threat to quality, along with scripted reading programs like the Science of Reading, and just attacks on helping children develop anti-bias and cultural competency. So I'm so excited to be joined today by Michele Hemenway Pullen, who is a professor with Early Childhood Research Center at University of Louisville. She is also one of our facilitators for our Kentucky Working Group for DEY. I'm a recent recipient of a mini grant. And joining her is Anastasia Higginbotham, who is the author of Not My Idea, a book about whiteness, and the creator of Ordinary Terrible Things series, dealing with death, divorce, sex, queer identity, and healing from abuse, all published by Daughter Press. Thank you so much for joining me, Michele and Anastasia.
Thank
You're
you for
welcome.
having us. Yeah.
Awesome. So I want to start with you, Michele. You received one of the DEY mini grants. If you're unfamiliar, go to DEY.org and click on mini grants and learn more about the funds we make available. But Michele recently got a grant, and so I want you to tell us a little bit about the grant and what you used it for, and why you decided to use that money for that event.
Well, I had been using Anastasia's book series that you just mentioned, published by Daughter Press, Ordinary Terrible Things. I had been using those books minus the last one, which was published while we were in conversation for a few years, Anastasia and I. And I had been using those with teachers, not so much with the idea that they would read them necessarily to children. I was using them because I believe that those books really represent the need to address childhood, no matter what age you are. So for me to use those books to help teachers renegotiate their own childhoods and also consider the childhoods that are before them every day, right? And I began conversation with Anastasia. I just decided to reach out to her and say, I've been using your books and make these journals for these teachers. And she just flung the doors wide open to my complete disbelief and stayed in conversation with me for years every Tuesday. We would just talk about these books and about the need for this work in childhood. And I saw this opportunity to bring her to Louisville finally after COVID was over and we, blah, blah, blah. We could see her in person at last. And I thought, I wonder if DEY would give me money so everybody could have a book. I thought, doesn't that just make perfect sense? And apparently you all thought so also. So it was wonderful. She was here for several days. She met lots of various people and various connections to the world of early childhood that we are all part of. And every one of them received a book, Not My Idea, a book about whiteness. So it was an extraordinary experience for people to actually open the book and read it while she was with them. And the feedback we got was that being able to actually put your hands on the book and see the pictures inside of it and see what Anastasia was going to work with them on was a real difference maker for them. So thank you to DEY. And, it was, like I say, it was really a game changer to have the book in addition to also having Anastasia in person.
You're welcome, and thank you for applying. We do the mini grants. We want to fund projects that really help put forth our mission, right? And so getting books in the hands of teachers, we
Yep.
launched DEY Band Book Club earlier this year, where we feature a band or challenged book, and so you did a
Right.
recording for that, and so it was
Yeah.
great that we were able to support this in that way. So thank you so much, Michelle.
Yeah.
So Anastasia, tell me, and I did what you sent me the video link, and I loved listening to the book. It was amazing. Tell me a little
Oh,
bit
good.
about Not My Idea, a book about whiteness. What, and I know you have this amazing series too, but what's kind of like driving you to write these books for young children?
My own childhood is what's driving me, and everything I remember about being taking everything very literally as a child, and um, noticing how much adults want to kind of wave away things that are complicated or difficult, as if children are not really thoughtful about them, as if children don't have any insight into them, or as if children can't handle what they're perceiving. And of course, there's a lot of stuff out there in the world that's not, you don't necessarily want to put in front of children, but but their own experience is not one of those things. So a child going through divorce, a child going through death of a loved one, whether it's a pet or a beloved family member or a friend's parent or something like that. Um, all of the uh, all of the liveliness of a child's internal life is what compels me. And so I wrote these books that center a child in their own experiences of change or loss, which always involves growth, so long as there is nourishment um, for them finding out more about themselves in the process. And so Not My Idea, a book about whiteness, I dedicated it to my white sons. I understood my responsibility and my opportunity as a white mother of white sons to make sure they understand what they're stepping into and what they have, what they carry into the room with them, that if I didn't teach them about it, they wouldn't know. They wouldn't know that they have been racialized, that they have been weaponized. And they could go their whole lives and just not have consciousness. And in not having consciousness and not having an understanding and education in the history that 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 follows us to this present moment, they could do a lot of harm. And I needed to be deliberate and intentional and loving and uh, focused about making sure that they had access to information they wouldn't otherwise get. And so the information I wanted them to have was about the legacy of what is the word I'm looking, of planting justice, of cultivating justice with other like-minded folks, following the leaders of Black liberation into this legacy of resistance. And I wanted them to know that that is the history that they get to step into, that there's a place for them there. And if you remember when Bree Newsom took down the Confederate flag, and there was a white man at the base of the pole with the reflector vest on. And I remember moments like that, seeing those as opportunities to say to my sons, that's your place. And I found it so empowering. I found it so generative and just to invite them into solidarity and teach them to notice how together they can be with other people. It doesn't have to be isolating. It doesn't have to be even difficult. It's often the label is put on it like, oh, these are very hard conversations. Oh, that's going to be a tough book. When I would tell people that I'm doing a book about whiteness, and I was like, it's not. That's part of the lie. That's part of the deception and the distortion, is that it's going to be very hard. It's not. Children understand when you tell them the game is rigged. They understand what that means, and they have a framework for working with that and finding their integrity within it, so they can navigate, and so that the burden of navigating the lies of white supremacy and the violence of white supremacy and white indifference is it doesn't have to be shouldered only by Black and brown children. It's never been, we've never trusted white children en masse to take up some of that and say, no, this is not okay with me either. I want something different for us as well. So that book is my effort to do that.
Thank you. Thank you. I really love that. There's so many things you touched upon. I think that story about Bree Newsome and what we call a co-conspirator, right? He was a white male co-conspirator. At a moment when she was climbing up the flag, the police were going to electrify it. And he put his hand on the pole, knowing that they would not tase the pole with a white man touching it. Like that was the moment where he really knew what it was his job to be there, but by that act, by touching and holding the pole, and then they didn't electrify it, and she was able to do it, right? And so that level of solidarity, being a co-conspirator, being like, you know, I'm going to show up and I'm going to be here in this moment. And I think, you know, you're right. I feel like a lot of the work, and it's so important, the anti-bias work we do in early childhood is so great, right? We're all the same, we're all different, we're all equal. But I do feel the next step that we need to take is helping children recognize racism, anti-Blackness, because we tell them that it shouldn't exist, but we don't tell them that it does.
That it does.
Thrown off guard when someone says or does something racist because they don't have a frame of reference. Right. So we have to really say, okay, yeah, you should be anti-bias and you should look at people and you should celebrate their differences and love them for who they are. But the rest of the world might not be doing that. What should you do when you hear someone say something that's racist or something that's sexist or something that's, you know, homophobic, right? How do you respond in the moment? And I think that needs to be. And so I think something like this is super important because kids need the tools. And as you said, they are little justice detectives. They are fairness moderate. They know when something's unfair to their core, right? They know because they spend the beginning of their lives in a very unfair situation where they are powerless and dependent on other people. So they're highly aware of that situation, right? But often they lack the tools. And so I think this is a good tool for just having a conversation, just reading about it, making it normal. So that they can say, oh, that sounds like whiteness, right? That sounds like how whiteness operates, right?
Right. They can have that language and know there's a system, there are forces at work that are out there. Also, even when something racist pops into their mind, a thought, they can interrogate that and be like, where did I get that?
And instead of saying, I'm not racist, and denying that you were thinking that, no, lean into it. I was thinking that. Where'd that come from?
Where'd that come from? And then, it's so much opportunity to make it less of it's not an individual issue.
It's not. And it does have to start in the early years. I know people are worried that young kids can't, but they're making so many thoughts. They're putting together ideas about race and skin color. And a lot of times they're just observing their environment, you know. I remember once watching a video, I think it was like an ABC special where they had kids talking and their parents were kind of like listening in another room. And so they were talking freely and they were like, yeah, our parents say that everyone's equal, but they don't have any Black friends. We don't live around people of color. So obviously we're not all white. And the parents were shocked because they hadn't really thought that their kids, but that's the kind of logic the kids are making. Don't tell us one thing and then we see something completely different. Like they're not, you know, they understand that the world is divided, right? When it comes to these issues. And if we're not having conversations with them about them and talking, and I'm like, yeah, I'm not saying run out and go get a bunch of Black friends, but talk to your children and say, you're right. I grew up as a white person and I don't have a lot of friends of color, and that's a problem, right? And I don't want you to be like that, right? And so it's so important, I think, that we have these conversations, especially in the current context. So as you know, multiple states are banning books about racism. I think your book is on a challenge list in some states where they're not allowed to read that. They're banning teaching kids. They're calling it critical race theory, but it's really teaching kids about diversity and anti-bias and all this work. And so that's a threat to quality in our view, right? High quality early childhood education is anti-bias, it's anti-racist, it's anti-oppressive, and it believes in presenting those things to children in developmentally appropriate ways. And so laws that then, prevent teachers from doing that, right? That threatens our ability to be high quality caregivers and create high quality environments, right? So can you talk a little bit about, Michele, we'll start with you. What are your concerns? And I don't know if it's happening specifically in your area or just in general, but what are your concerns around the book bans and how that's impacting the field?
Well, it's Kentucky, and it's everything you think it probably is. It's a state that's very much entrenched long before this recent, surge of bans around the country. Kentucky's always, been that way, and now it's basically so entrenched that I have teachers that have told me that they're afraid to use a book like Anastasia's, but they're going to. And for me, I think this question of banned books, right, is really for teachers, no matter what age group you're with, but especially in early childhood, where the genius of toddlerhood is that anything is possible, right? When you're a toddler, it's all possible. And so it's very interesting to me to think about thought regulation in an age group where you may attempt to regulate thought, but a toddler's a toddler, a 4-year-old's a 4-year-old, a 5-year-old's a 5-year-old, and so on. And I think this idea of policing thought, which is for me what banned books are about, right? I mean, we can all agree on that, I think. So to ban a book as a reflection of your desire to police thought and not have a young white child understand whiteness, for example. So one of my favorite lines in Anastasia's book is, "You can be white without signing on to whiteness." And for me, with kids, that's the powerful piece right there. If they can walk out of that book with that in their toolbox, I feel so much better for them. And I think that trying to regulate that thought is fairly futile in a lot of ways. But if we can be just mindful that it's this tension between people's freedoms, your freedom to say, I don't want my child to read that book at school, my freedom to teach the book. So it's back and forth, that tension. And to me, that's the tension that's always existed in the DNA of this country, is whose freedom is this for? So when I hear about banned books, I say, whose freedom is this for? Right? Who are we? So I really, just feel like it's a conversation opener. If somebody talks to me about Anastasia's book, I welcome it, because I can say, regulating the thoughts of white children or any child, right? It begs the question, whose freedom is this for?
I love that, because, on the one side where we hear that it's all about freedom, but it's individual
Right.
freedom. It's the freedom to discriminate, the freedom to hate, right? And that's not what we're focusing on, right? We want the freedom to be the opposite, to develop a positive sense of what it means to be white, not connected to this idea of whiteness that has a lot of problematic things about it, right?
Yeah.
Right. And so I'm working on defending the earlier, we've been working on a anti-racist framework for early childhood, right? And so the first part is really racial ethnic identity development. We have to understand that young children are developing their racial identity, how they perceive themselves racially and how others perceive them. And we don't want to wait. Typically, the research on racial identity development looks at a catalyst moment in the middle grade years, early adolescence. We can't wait that long. Their kids are developing their racial identity at babies, infants, toddlers, right? Preschoolers, kindergarten, first grade. So we have to start now. We have to really think. And I've been in early childhood for 20 years, and very rarely are we addressing this to early childhood teachers.
Right. Yeah, that is why I use the books in my
What are you doing
courses.
for?
Oh, sorry. I'm
No,
sorry.
go ahead.
Yeah, I use these books in my courses. And what's the good news for all of us is that, I went in with some trepidation about Not My Idea. And what I found was these teachers were starved for it.
Mm.
And they had someone come in the class 2 weeks after we had really made a deep dive into the book and about the idea that it's banned, right?
Mm.
And all of the false claims associated with the book. And so 2 weeks after that deep dive, somebody comes into my classroom, a 27-year-old white woman, and says that she understands what Black women are experiencing in her center where she is the director of early childhood. Every single one of my students' hands shot up and said, no, you don't.
Mm.
And I thought, okay, here we go. Now we're having the conversation. You can ban the book all you want. But if it's collective freedom that we're after, when we answer the question, whose freedom is this for? If it's collective freedom, we have our answer.
And that should be what we talk about too, collective liberation,
Exactly.
collective freedom.
Exactly.
It's not about individual.
Yes. Right.
So Anastasia, as an author who's written probably multiple books that are banned and challenged,
Yeah.
tell us what it's like from your perspective that your work is being legislated out of young people's lives.
Well, the good news is it's only legislated out of the schools and libraries. I mean, that's not good news, but it's not, it is available in the world. It exists in the world and people can still read what they want to read and they can access it if they're looking for it. But a couple of things. One, there's always the assumption that if a book is banned, it's making it a bestseller. And that is not so. That's just not true. And so people laugh it off. They think it's there's this idea, and people laugh and say, "How lucky for you that you're banned, that your book is banned. Now it'll be a bestseller. You'll make a bunch of money. It's great." And it's like, no, that's not what is happening. And so one, I want to challenge that assumption, and then this goes to what Michele was saying. When you ban children from books, you ban them from themselves because that's who they're looking for in those pages of the book. So in terms of a healthy white racial identity, that's no small feat in this country. And I have had parents say to me at workshops, like at a school or something, when the school brings me in to talk to the parents about whiteness, the white parents. And this man said to me, I would never share your book with my child. It might make him feel bad about being white. And I said, how do you know he doesn't already feel bad about being white? There's nothing good happening inside of that self-doubt and silence around whiteness when you're a white child and you see and you sense and you know something's wrong, something's off. And people you care about and people who are close to you, your classmate, you know that there's unfairness. You can see that, maybe you and your friend both did the same shenanigans at school, but you didn't get punished as severely as your friend. I mean, they're experiencing the they're experiencing the injustices daily already, and they don't know how to make sense of it without this support. And so a healthy racial identity when you're white is something that I love to hear that you are invested in that, because the lie is that this will make white kids feel bad. And the truth is, oh my gosh, it's such a relief to find out that you have some power to channel into liberation for everyone, including yourself, from a system that you did not consent to. You did not consent to a structure that would favor you at the cost of your own humanity, at the cost of your own soul, at the cost of your connection and presence within a collective, and your value within a collective. just experience, let alone movement. So, and I also want to say that, you know, in terms of the bands, you know how Toni Morrison says the primary function of racism is distraction?
Yeah.
And I really feel like the primary function of these book bans is fear.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like, I'm just like, you know, get the books that you like, get together with your people and read them to the children. Like, bring the books with you when you hang out with other parents. Just make sure they're available to the people in your life. And yes, we do have to advocate for the libraries and advocate for the teachers. And it is very upsetting when I hear that librarians can be fined and that teachers can be punished for sharing these books. And I have had the experience myself of, like, I'm on my way into the school, and they look at the titles and they're like, not that one. Don't read that one. And I'm actually referring to the one about sex. Tell me about sex, Grandma. They're like, do not. And you know, and so I have the experience of, like, tucking it away and being like, okay, if that's what we're doing. And so, you know, we're trying to work with it. And yeah, we need to look out for each other, and also don't be daunted. Get the materials how you want to get them, and share them, and make sure we create our own environments. We need to come into connection with each other more and more and more anyway. So let's use this as the excuse that we didn't even need to get together and make sure kids have the information. And then we get to be deliberate about what we want them to know about themselves primarily.
Yeah, I love it. You know, and I've been thinking a lot about this idea that, you know, reading a book about whiteness or talking about race is going to make children feel bad. And I kind of want to push back people and say, you know, I don't know how many young children have watched the ASPCA commercial with Sarah McLachlan and those poor animals. And guess what? They feel bad. They feel horrible, because who doesn't? Like, it is a mark of a good, empathetic human being to see abandoned, hurt animals shivering and to feel bad. I mean, I've had parents tell me their children, like it's like that video, like that commercial changed their life. Like, they couldn't, or the first time they come across someone who's unhoused, and it shocks them to their core to realize that someone is sleeping on the street and they feel bad. So it's not such a bad thing to feel bad about bad things, right? Like, racism is a bad thing. Discrimination is a bad thing. And you should feel bad that it exists in the world, but then we think they're going to feel guilty. And that's not necessarily what they feel if we don't help them think through it, right? All right. It's not their fault that, like you said, it's not your idea. Whiteness has been existing forever. You just happen to be born white. You didn't ask for this. You didn't sign up for it. But this idea that they're going to feel bad about discrimination. They're going to feel bad about racism. They're going to feel bad about oppression, as we all should. But what they really get is a sense of, okay, what can I do now in this system that wants me to act in one way, but I'm saying no to that. Right? It's very empowering.
And what are they going to aim at their parents too? Because when you find out, you look at your parents and you're like, all right, what are you two doing about this?
Yeah,
exactly.
And that's where I think the parents are very, I don't want my kid reading that. And I talk about this with parents all the time, and I'm like, yes, your kid's going to come home and say something like, oh, you're being racist, right? Yes. I've had Black kids tell a white teacher who said, take your notebook out, you're being racist. Of course, they're going to over exaggerate, and they're joking, right? But like, don't be afraid of that, right? Lean into that kind. Why would you say that? What about this interaction makes you think because I'm talking about race? Because I said I don't like that person. I don't not like them because of their race. I don't like them because they said something horrible, right? Like how conversation. I mean, I know it's scary because I'm raising two children who I want to be very, stand up for themselves, very opinionated and all that. And I know it's gonna come back to me, right? And
Yeah.
they have to be able to say, no, mom, that wasn't cool. Like, no, mom, we don't like that you did that. Like, or no, mom, that made it right. Because then they're not gonna be able to tell a stranger if they can't tell me, right?
Yeah.
And so I get it. It's scary. We don't want our kids, saying stuff, but we also have to welcome the opportunity. It's different for me because I'm a new parent through adoption, but I tell my kids all the time, like, I've never done this before. Like, I might be messing up. Like, I don't know how to go back and change things. My daughter's like, just change it, mom. Just create a new rule. And I'm like, you're gonna like. I try to tell her I should have started out stricter and eased up. Instead, I started off easy, and now I'm trying to get stricter, and that's I feel like that's hard to do. And she's just like, do it. And my son's like, don't go strict, right? Like, so, but she recognizes, but she's like, you're the mom. If you want to change things, just change it, right? And so, but it's a great, honest conversation because I can tell them, like, I'm not doing it because I just feel like I made a mistake, and I feel I don't like how things are happening, and I want to do over in a way, right? And like, it's a great place to be in that conversation. And so I wish more parents would like lean into that. Yeah, it's heavy. Yeah, it's hard. And yeah, they might look at their racist uncle and say, hey, don't say that, right? Like, they might, say something like that. And that's okay, right? That's okay. But it is scary for parents. And I think that one of the areas I feel like in the field we don't do well is we don't bring parents on this journey with us, right? We are asking them to talk to their children about things they might not have talked about. So the
Right.
part of our framework for our anti-racist framework is teachers doing the self-work to look
Yes,
at their own racial identity development.
right.
Where are you in the stages of racial identity?
Yes.
What have you experienced? Where are you at? Because if you don't do this self work, you can't really start doing this with young children. It starts with the educator and understanding the process, but really examining your own social identities, right? Where are you in the dominant? Where are you not in a non-dominant? How do the identities show up in your life, right? When have you heard people say things that made you uncomfortable? And like, all of these things have to be addressed, right, at that level that I think is important. But I also say, when I'm talking to educators, like, don't be afraid to be like, talk to parents, like, this is the book we're reading this month, and this is why I'm going to read it, and these are some things that we might talk about. And then after, this is what your kid said. Like, don't let them be surprised when they get home, right, that they but not in a, don't, I'm telling you this so you can not, like, you can take your kid out. No, I'm telling you this because we're doing this, and I want you to be a partner in this. I want you to join me. Read the book to the parents. Maybe you do
Yeah.
a Zoom
Right.
reading with them so they can get a sense of it and talk about it. But I think, there's always going to be some resistance, but I think if we invite parents to take the journey with their child, with us, that we're going to scaffold them just as much, then they'll be more likely. But they're scared. They don't have the language. They don't feeling inadequate around their children. They don't like feeling worried that they're going to say something and that someone's going to call them a racist and it's going to be their child, right? And so I think, that's one area where I hope we can do a lot. Well, I want to wrap this up. I do want to end with just your thoughts. So I've asked this in the last dialogue, and I think this will be a format moving forward. What advice would you give to maybe a new teacher or a new parent about, feeling conflicted about reading banned and challenged books? How would you tell them what would you say? I know, Michele, you work with new teachers, and Anastasia, maybe a parent is looking at your book on the shelf and they don't know what to do. So why don't we start with you, Anastasia? What kind of advice would you say to these folks?
I would say, I mean, I can only speak for my books for the, well, no, let me say it this way. It's like, know yourself in the experience of reading the book well enough to know, like, what are the parts of this that really draw you in? What are the parts that make you, like, just notice your own experience of what kind of makes you feel a little like you want to lean away from it. What makes you feel like you want to lean forward? Well, like, what is your emotional experience of reading this book before you share it, so that you can allow your child to have an authentic experience of the book as well. So, like, you don't feel like you need to control their responses to it, because you already just, you can just be rooted and grounded in your own. I like the cover. I like this, on this page, I learned something brand new. And we can kind of just go with our children, not really knowing what the next page is going to be, or why the author did that, or whether it was right or not. Like, let's just engage with the material. Like, what are the people doing on this page? What does that word make you feel? What's going on for you? And put it down when it's obvious that the child has had enough. Just put it down. It's all right. It's not, doesn't betray anybody to get 4 pages in and have a whole thing happen where you're off on a tangent together and people are talking and having a lot of questions. Come back to it another time.
I love that. Thank you. And Michele, what would you say? A teacher is like, I want to read this book, but I don't think I should, or I don't think I can.
Yeah, I guess because of all these years of working with so many teachers already in the system, pre-service educators, teachers out there for various reasons, taking a workshop I'm doing with the book and journaling about the book and going on. And so now what I do say to parents and new teachers is it's a good time to set a new precedent. It's a good time to put aside everything that's holding you back. This is the moment, right? There's no better moment. We've got to move out of seeing 2 children together, one black, one white, one, whatever the mix is, and say, oh, we're getting somewhere. Look at this. No, we've gotten nowhere when we look at this, unless we can say that the white child has been taught, will you fight for him? Will you fight for her? There's got to be another level of activity that we now need to directly instruct. We can't look away from this. You're going to talk to Nancy about the science of reading, I know. And so we've favored all of these very intellectual activities that are completely beyond the scope of a young child's abilities and natural affinities for. And we've avoided everything in their souls and their hearts that they have a natural affinity for. Their natural affinity would be to fight for each other. We are inclined to take care of one another. And I think the time is over when we can have discourse about whether it's a good idea. So I am very firm with parents and teachers. I've had teachers go on the journey with parents. I've had teachers dive into their own Anastasia's done a meditation that I do with teachers where you go back and you look at who did I grow up with? Where was I? What things did I come to believe? And then how does that show up every day? So I think that what I would say to parents and teachers is that it's time for abolition. It's time to stop talking about whether this is a good idea and do it. And the good news is we have guides for that now. I told Anastasia when I met her, your books were for the future, so the future's here. It's here. And so let's do something with it.
I love that so much. Thank you so much for joining me for our DEY dialogue. This was just a great conversation. I'm so grateful to all the work that both Michele and Anastasia are doing. I look forward to more of it. So Michele, like I said, is co-facilitating one of our working groups. So really excited to see what's going to happen in Kentucky. And Anastasia, we'd love to have you back, do more discussions you're doing. So stay tuned for more email requests from me. And for those of you who are joining, we hope that you've registered and you will attend our 6th annual Summer Institute begins on Monday, June 24th at 4 p.m. Eastern and ends on Wednesday, June 26th, also 4 to 6 p.m. Eastern. And it is day 3 where we'll be talking about threats to childhood and specifically issues around anti-bias and anti-racism. And we'll talk a little bit about the framework that we're going to release shortly after that. I'm very excited. I've been working on this framework for a couple of years and I'm nervous, but I'm just going to put it out there, get some feedback and we get some, professional development around it and flesh out the rest of it because it's a 4-part framework. And this is just the first part, which is the most important part, the positive racial identity development piece that I think is missing in this work. So stay tuned. Join us in June. And thank you again, Michele and Anastasia. Until the next DEY dialogue, please stay committed in the defense of children everywhere. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Bye.